What if I told you that the death of a single man broken in flesh, hollow in soul, and monstrous in form, leashed a continental war that bled Europe for a decade? That his mere breath, rattling through malformed lungs, was the whisper before the storm that shattered empires. This is not a tale of magic, but it feels like one. He was called El Hechizado, the Bewitched One. And when you see his face, you understand why. But Charles II of Spain was not cursed by witches. He was cursed by blood, his own blood. What you're about to hear is a story draped in velvet and rot. Whispered through the centuries by candlelight, obsessed with purity, they turned their bloodline into a prison of flesh. Painted in tones of black, gold, and blood. The Habsburgs were Europe's most powerful family, but also its most doomed. For 2 centuries, they folded their family tree inward. Cousins wedded cousins, uncles took nieces, and eventually the blood itself began to curdle. Not the cooing of an infant only, the gasping rattle of malformed lungs. He did not cry. Charles's mother, Mariana of Austria, was also his aunt. His father, Philip IV, was also her uncle. This unholy union birthed a child with bones like reeds, a jaw like a broken drawbridge, and eyes too far apart. As if trying to escape the face they were born into, Charles was born silent. Some whispered he couldn't. His soul screams inside his crooked bones. Food had to be mashed into pulp. So often he'd choke and gag, convinced her son would die by drowning in his own spit. And the entire court would sit in silence as he clawed at his own throat, eyes bulging. His baptism was interrupted twice by seizures. The midwives crossed themselves, lived and ruled. He stood barely 5 feet tall, his back hunched like a monk's, his chest concave. His legs bowed outward like bent timber, and his hands trembled with every gesture. And that terrified them most of all. The priests hesitated. He could not close his mouth. His skin wept open sores. He was plagued by fevers that left him babbling Latin prayers. He had never been taught. His tongue lolled helplessly. Speech was a moist, slurred murmur, like a dying man whispering through soup. One servant wrote in a secret letter, "He is not meant for earth, but for penance." At 15, Charles was officially crowned King of Spain. Yet when ambassadors first laid eyes upon him, they recoiled. His lower jaw jutted like a cliff. At royal dinners, servants stood at attention with napkins, not for formality, but to dab the endless saliva dripping from their monarch's lips. The Habsburg jaw, they called it. But it was more than a name, it was a curse you could see, smell, and hear. He could not chew. His mother, Queen Mariana, was once found by candlelight weeping in the chapel, and yet Charles lived. Charles's body was a ruin. He learned to walk at age 8. He learned to read at 10 and forgot by 12. His mind, say some scholars, never developed past that of a 7-year-old. But here's what the historians rarely say. Charles would scream in the middle of the night, not out of madness, but terror. He said they visited him, who his confessor asked. The ones who have my face, but no skin. For decades, no servant dared to sleep in the room beside him. His hair fell out in clumps. A priest once remarked, "The devil does not possess him. He is what remains when the devil leaves." A king must do 3 things: rule, command, and breed. Charles II could do none of them. At 17, he married Marie Louise, of a French princess said to have eyes like honey and a wit sharper than steel. But what awaited her in Madrid was not a king, but a half-grown shadow of one. Their wedding night is the stuff of whispered horror. Marie Louise was found the next morning, weeping into her bedsheets, her hair undone, her gown torn at the shoulder, even frightened. Like a boy locked in a man's room, one servant said. Charles was said to be confused. He never touched her again. For 10 years, Marie Louise lived as a ghost queen, unformed, smooth as marble, cold as stone. She prayed, fasted, drank bitter brews meant to ignite her womb. But the truth was unspoken and known to all. Charles was impotent, not in heart, but in flesh. Doctors described his body in hushed tones. They paraded apothecaries through her chambers, forced her to swallow concoctions that burned her throat and blackened her gums. The genitals of a boy, not yet 12. The court, of course, blamed the queen. Her hair thinned. Her laughter vanished. She died suddenly at age 26. Some say from melancholy, others from poison. His bones cracked when he stood. His memory faltered. But for her life. 2 months later, Charles remarried. Eyes wide, whispering. Her name, Maria Anna of Neuburga, German princess, whose family was known for miraculous fertility. She had 11 siblings. She would have none. She arrived to find a palace already grieving both for the dead queen and for the living king. Maria Anna described her husband in a secret letter. He smells of mold and milk. His hands tremble like leaves. When he sleeps, he weeps. The new queen endured the same rituals as the last. Fertility tonics, moonlit prayers, physicians prodding her womb like soil. But this time, there was panic behind the eyes of the courtiers, because time was running out. Charles, by now, was aging like spoiled fruit, softening, blackening, collapsing from within. His speech had degraded into murmurs, body convulsing, a crucifix jammed between his teeth to keep him from biting his own tongue. At dinner, he sometimes forgot who he was married to. Maria Anna began to fear not only for Spain. She said she once woke up to find Charles standing over her. There's something inside me. It's not me anymore. The priests came next. He bled from his eyes. When physicians failed, when potions soured and queens died childless, Spain turned to its oldest weapon, exorcism. Father Diaz arrived in 1698, a man with eyes like coal and hands that trembled when holding the cross. When he awoke, he whispered, he believed the entire palace was cursed. Even silverware, he declared. The queen's harp was thrown into the fire. A mirror that once hung in the late queen's chamber was shattered with a hammer. The king is not sick. He is infested. Not with demons, but 47 devils, each with a name, a voice, a purpose. Each night, the throne room became a theater of terror. Candles lined the walls. Nobles stood in silence. And in the center, Charles II knelt his rolling back. Holy water mixed with bone dust was poured down his throat. He vomited violently. A dove flew into the hall and landed on Charles's shoulder. Priests shouted names. As Medeo, one by one, they tried to cast them out. But Charles only grew worse. He began speaking in voices low, guttural sounds in languages no one recognized. He clotted his own skin. In one session, he collapsed for 3 days. They left. But they left something else behind. Father Diaz was not satisfied, and so began the purging. Servants were ordered to burn everything Charles had touched: bed linens, clothing, tapestries, chairs, portraits. Gifts from foreign courts were deemed tainted. The marble floor beneath Charles's throne was scrubbed with salt water and vinegar. The royal chapel was repainted. Court musicians were dismissed music, they said. Summoned them. The climax of this madness, he wept. He believed it was his soul. Finally escaping, the final exorcism took place on a cold night in October, 1699. Candles flickered like dying stars. Thunder clawed at the palace windows. Inside the throne room, Charles knelt for what would be the last time, not as a king, but as a vessel. Father Diaz approached, flanked by 2 bishops in black, held a reliquary of Saint Benedict in one hand and a vial of blood from a martyred child in the other. He shouted in Latin, "We cast thee out, Legion. Leave this body of sorrow." Charles howled, not like a man, but like a thing breaking. His back arched unnaturally, his skin blistered. He screamed a name no one had ever heard, Velcathor, a name not in any scripture. Witnesses reported a smell sweet, rotting, like meat left in a crypt. The flames turned blue. The floor trembled. The queen fainted. And then silence. Charles collapsed. For 3 days he did not speak, did not blink, did not breathe deeply. When he awoke, he looked at his mother and whispered, "It is still in me. But now it waits." Charles II died a year later, November 1st, 1700. His body was cold long before his soul left it. The autopsy was ordered in secret. Only 4 men attended: a royal physician, a monk, a scribe, and a butcher who had once prepared elephants for the king's menagerie. The findings were never meant to be public. But like all unspeakable truths, they bled into rumor. His heart was the size of a walnut. His lungs were black and soft, like rotting pears. His intestines were knotted and partially liquefied. His stomach was filled with hair. And most horrifying of all, his brain floated in a pool of dark fluid. The surgeon described it as a sea of shadows in a glass bowl. His skull contained lesions, tiny holes, almost as if something had been trying to get out. The monk vomited. The scribe fainted. The report was sealed. But the whispers never stopped. Some said he had no liver. Others claimed his bones were hollow. One tale insisted that his blood had turned black when exposed to air, and smelled not of iron, but of sulfur. Charles died childless. No heir, no continuation. Only ashes, rumors, and war. Within weeks of his death, the great powers of Europe began to move. France, Austria, England, they all claimed the Spanish throne. The War of the Spanish Succession would last 13 years. It would kill over 400,000 men. It would redraw the map of Europe and doom the Habsburgs to irrelevance. And all because a single man, twisted by his ancestors' ambition, had lived too long and died too empty. His coffin was said to creak for 3 days after burial. The candles at his funeral would not stay lit. The pigeons in Madrid flew in circles for hours, refusing to land, a courtier wrote. We buried a man, but what died was more than a man. It was the ghost of a dynasty and the last breath of a cursed crown. After Charles II died, the palace grew quiet. Too quiet. The tapestries stopped moving in the wind. Mirrors cracked without touch. Servants reported hearing footsteps in halls long empty. One nursemaid said she saw Charles weeks after his burial standing in the moonlight in the Queen's old room. He said nothing, just wept. In Madrid, birds refused to land on the palace roof. Dogs howled at the throne room. And every painting of Charles began to fade, his face disappearing first. The Vatican sent an envoy. He declared the palace spiritually unstable. The court chaplain, in his final sermon, whispered, "We tried to bury a body, but we forgot to bury the blood." Textbooks will tell you that Charles II was the end of a dynasty, an unfortunate product of inbreeding and superstition. They'll mention mandibular prognathism. They'll mention the War of the Spanish Succession. But they won't mention the dove that landed on his coffin, or the flowers that wilted instantly in his tomb. They won't tell you that after his death. Every royal child born into the Habsburg line suffered strange illnesses, bleeding gums, fused vertebrae, insomnia filled with screaming. Coincidence? Or something older than kings? Some say the family was never cursed. Some say the family was the curse. Charles II was not evil. He was not weak. He was not even a man in the way others were. He was a mirror. A reflection of centuries of arrogance. A living painting of what happens when power refuses to bend, even to nature. The final Habsburg was not destroyed by enemies. He was broken by legacy. So if you walk past the royal palace in Madrid on a quiet night, and you see a candle flicker in an empty room, don't look too closely. You might still find a man with a mouth that doesn't close, waiting for someone to finally let him die properly.